Wow, it's certainly been a hectic month. I can't believe I haven't posted anything on the vlog since the first day of August, and as a matter of fact, I haven't posted a video since a week back into July. But I had an idea the other day, and it's one that I want to share with you, and it would involve a little bit of card cutting, but I think after that, then you could develop a lot of different ways into this debate, and it would be a very good broad spectrum generic. Now, before I go too far, one of the things I want to say is this is not the kind of argument I think you would want to make for a parent judge, because it's slightly complicated. There are a couple of easy ways to misunderstand it, and it's also an argument that has just a little bit of goofiness factor to it. It's one of the kinds of arguments that we used to really enjoy going for, because it does go a little counterintuitive, and it's not necessarily a very vanilla argument, but there are parts of this argument that hang together very well, very tightly, and I think that it could make a pretty potent explanation if you have the kind of judge who appreciates that you participate in debate for the experience of putting together arguments that sometimes are not the most sort of predictable, that it's a matter of really testing out your persuasive skills, even if an argument has just that little trace of being far-fetched. So, with that in mind, let me describe what the argument is. Now, it has to do with the likelihood that there will be a sweeping through of swine flu in the next 2 seasons. So, the first thing that you need to cut cards on, I'm going to call this premise number 1, is that a pandemic of swine flu is inevitable. Now, pandemic is a scare word, but it really just means that swine flu is going to be everywhere, and that there are going to be a lot of cases of it. And there are a lot of different illnesses that are pandemic that go everywhere, so that's not necessarily the part of the argument where you have to get big and scary yet. But you need to cut a few cards that say, through the cold and flu season of 2009-2010, the winter months, and through the cold and flu season that follows, we are likely to have a couple of waves of swine flu that go all over the world. And honestly, I don't think those are going to be too hard to find, because if you've been following the news, it's already happening. But you might think that that creates uniqueness problems with the disadvantage. It really doesn't. Bear with me here, because this is an argument that I think that you're going to have to be very careful in your explanations, but it's whatever problems you might sense at first, they're surmountable. The second premise of the argument, what you have to do is you're going to need to do a little reading up on the flu pandemic of 1918 to 1920, the Spanish flu that happened during World War I. And if you grasp the history of that, then it makes a lot more sense why people have been taking this possible swine flu pandemic that's coming this fall, why they've been taking it so seriously. Here's what usually happens. Every year, the flu goes all over the world. And the flu is on a list of different ailments that people get from time to time that actually do take a few lives, but it's not so big, so large scale, so dangerous that it actually qualifies as a public health crisis. In a typical year, the people who are most in danger of dying from the flu are people who are very, very old or very, very young, who have very weak immune systems, who are not really built to take a serious shock to the system. So if you're a very, very young baby or toddler who comes down with the flu, you have to take that very seriously. And sometimes, with people who are in the very final stages of life, people who are in their 90s or beyond, if they come down with the flu, believe it or not, there's some doctors who say it's almost a kindness, because it's a death that takes a couple of days instead of taking month after month after month of heroic measures and being on machines and so forth. But that's what usually happens. What happened in 1918, between 1918 and 1920, what was so terrifying about it was there was a particular strain of flu that swept over the world and was killing perfectly healthy young adults. And what was especially frightening about that was it would do so quickly. It didn't do this in every case, but in a lot of cases, you might show your first symptom of a flu by noon, and by nightfall be dead. I mean, it struck people down just like a lightning bolt out of the blue. What we've come to understand more recently, we think what was happening is what we would call a cytokine storm. And you can do a little bit of research on cytokine storm, C-Y-T-O-K-I-N-E. And what that does is that describes storm is a good word for it, a perfect storm where the challenge that the flu virus makes to your immune system for reasons that we are still sort of understanding through scientific research, it sends your immune system into hyperdrive, and your body absolutely overreacts to the invasion of the virus, which means if you're young and you're fully healthy and you have a very powerful immune system, it will generate so much mucus, so many of the fluids, it'll generate so much of an overreaction that you can literally drown inside of yourself, and it can happen very, very quickly. And it can happen so quickly that it's almost impossible to treat. And from 1918 to 1920, that, going back and reconstructing from the data we have, we think that's what happened. A lot of healthy people were hit by the flu that year. It was called the Spanish flu because some of the earliest reported cases came out of Spain. And a lot of people, we believe now, were struck down by a cytokine storm. And there's reason to believe that the current strain of flu that is spreading around the world may trigger off cytokine storms in a lot of people. Okay, so premise number one, flu's going to go around the world for the next couple of years. Premise number two, it resembles the Spanish flu in that it has the potential to touch off a cytokine storm and kill healthy people instead of just the very old and the very young, and to kill them quickly. Here comes premise number three. Stress depresses the immune system. Now think about this. A depressed immune system is good if swine flu is out there. If you are exposed to swine flu, it is a very good idea for you to have a depressed immune system. If your immune system is going to overreact to swine flu, then if you have a depressed immune system, that overreaction is a lot less likely to kill you. So, how do you get your initial link? Well, I remember from a couple of environment topics that I've debated over the years, and you'd probably have to dig a little bit for this. I may go digging and see if I can find a couple of authors to recommend to you, but there are people who have done studies of mass media coverage of pollution and environmental problems. And there have been people who've written journal articles, magazine articles, and books about environmental hysteria. And when there is reporting on environmental problems, that spreads a climate of fear, which is stressful. And if you can find any mention in those articles that when there is media coverage of a solution, there's a new government policy that's going to make environmental law so much more efficient, and it's going to lead to better and better cleanups, then what you wind up with is a really nice generic link into the topic. Anything that the plan does to make U.S. environmental policy more effective is likely to lower people's stress levels, which means their immune system response will be elevated, and if swine flu comes to their town, bam, they are at risk of being struck down dead within a matter of hours.